Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name's Stephen. Today I'm doing 10 writing tips for writing a novel in 2024. This is for those if you've never done a novel or it's something you've been thinking about for a long time and you want to have a go and try it this year. It's a brand new year, it's a brand new opportunity to start writing a novel. There's a lot of information online, a lot of tips, a lot of rules. So I'm going to talk about some of my recommendations. These are guidelines for you to think about and hopefully apply to you as you start writing a novel. It could be that you've attempted novels in the past and never reached the end of a draft, so hopefully these will help you get to the end of it this year. Tip number 1 is to set realistic goals. If you think that you can do the book in 6 months, if you think you can do it in 12 months, then just work to that. But don't worry if you fall behind your own kind of deadline. I think a lot of the tips I'm going to talk about today is a lot of people put too many things ahead of actually working on the book. They start thinking about a whole bunch of other things. And it distracts you and it keeps you away from actually writing the book. So fitting in writing a book around your life at any stage, whether you're a full-time author or not, is really difficult. For many years, myself and many other people wrote books alongside their job. I still do it now because I work part-time. We have family, we have friends, we have commitments. We want to have a social life, we want to leave the house occasionally. If you sit down one day and you're going to focus on a book and then something else comes up, don't feel too guilty. If you suddenly can't do it that day, you'll be able to come back to it another day and do it. So be kind to yourself, be realistic about how long you're going to be able to do it to finish this first draft, and just keep working forward. That's the problem I think a lot of people have, is they get caught up with guilt and so-and-so's much further ahead than I am and I'm falling behind. Don't worry about any of that. Just keep moving forward. As long as you have some momentum and you keep chipping away at this mountain of a book, as it feels like every time I write a brand new one, that's the most important thing. So be realistic. Tip number 2, write the story that you want to write. When you start on work on this book, don't start thinking about the marketing, where it sits in the genre, the comparisons, when we're going to think about promotion or anything like that. Don't worry about any of that. All of that will come later. All of that is stuff that you'll have to focus on as part of the process. Don't even worry about if you're going to go self-published or traditionally published. Have fun with the story. Have fun with the process, because let's say you write this book and it does really well and it goes out. Eventually you have to sit down and do another book and so on. So you need to enjoy the process of having fun and writing the actual book. I love the writing process. It's creative. I'm coming up with stuff even though I plan my books. I'm throwing things in, seeing what happens. It's like when people talk about cooking. There's a huge focus on cookery shows, you know yourself. And some people talk about it kind of part science, part wizardry. They throw things in and they try something and see what happens. Writing is a bit like that sometimes. And it's fun and it's exploratory and you're just kind of coming up with stuff in your head and brainstorming, and it's just a lot of fun to do it. So enjoy that part of the process. Don't worry about any of the stuff later. Focus on your characters, focus on your world building, the plot, all of it, making it consistent, all of that stuff. But just enjoy it and write the story that you want right now, that's in your head, that's screaming to come out. The rest of the stuff will come later. All of which leads me into the third tip, which is don't follow a trend. Don't try and write to something in the market that you think, oh, I could do one of those. Yeah, I've got an idea that something's similar and that's really popular. I'll write my version of that, because there are lots of issues with doing that. If you chase a trend, there are a number of problems. Let's say you write the book in 6 months, you get it edited and you self-publish it and it comes out in 7 months. The market could have changed in that time. It could have been completely saturated and what you're writing now is no longer in fashion. People are bored with it. They moved on to the next thing. Publishing goes through cycles. A lot of what we see is self-publishing experiments with great ideas. They come up with some cool stuff, and then traditional publishing plays catch up. They have some books that are similar in the market for a year or 2, 3 years, and by then they're then going to see what the next idea is. So just come up with something cool that you want to do. Don't try and follow the trend. You might start a brand new trend, who knows? But write the thing that is in your head, not what you think you should be writing. Tip number 4 is to set realistic expectations. If this is the first time you've ever written a book, you may get it right first time. It may be that once you've written it, edited it, played around with it, revised it a few times, you look at it, you sit back and think, actually I'm quite happy with this. This is doing what I thought, it's worked out. Probably needs a little bit of work, get some beta readers and all that kind of stuff, but you're generally happy with it, that's great. However, it might be that you get to the end of it and look at it and go, well, this is awful. I can see that's not working. That hasn't come out how I wanted. Then don't be too hard on yourself. Writing, like anything else, takes practice. You have to do it over and over and over again. If you look back at any of your favourite authors, you go back to the beginning of their career, and even books that they probably haven't published that may turn up under pseudonyms and other things in different genres, they'll be rough. Some of my favourite authors, if I go back to their first novel, I can see the bones of what they're going to become, and that book isn't the best one they've ever done, but much further down the line, they do write some amazing books. So it's possible that the first book you ever write could be great, but then again, it might be that it actually isn't great and it needs a lot of work. So be kind to yourself, set realistic expectations, and if you do finish a book, you can still learn a lot from it, even if you're not happy with it, because you can look at it and say, what needs work? What would I have done better if I'd done it again? How would I do something different in the next story? So every trunk novel, I think, is useful in some ways. It's stepping stones. You can teach someone the technique of how to write, grammar, punctuation, style, world building, all of these things. But when you have to sit down and do it yourself, it's completely different. It takes practice and practice and practice. So if this is your first book and you've written it and you're not completely happy with it, don't be too hard on yourself. We all start out very, very rough, and hopefully we'll get better over time. Tip number 5 is don't worry about anybody else or what they're doing or what they've said. If you tell a friend about your book and they say something like, oh, that sounds like a film I've just saw, or I read a book that's similar to that, and then you're thinking, am I just writing the same kind of story? Am I just copying them? Am I just wasting my time? Don't worry about any of that. Some people say there are only a set number of stories in the world and that all we're doing is kind of recycling the same thing and looking at different things, and stories fall into tropes and all these kind of things. Maybe that's true. However, books come out every year, hundreds, thousands of books, self-published, traditional, all around the world, and no one ever looks at the book and says, well, that's just the same as 77 other books that I've seen of the last few years. It's the telling, it's the viewpoint, it's the lens that you have that's completely different. If you're writing a mystery book, it might be similar in some ways to others, but there are hundreds of mystery books. And yes, they'll have some familiar elements, but they're all different in the telling. It's not necessarily you're retelling the story. You're not sort of taking a book and doing your version of it. It's you've looked at the genre, you've studied it, you've read a lot in that area, and you thought, if I was going to tell a story similar to this, how would I do it? So don't worry about your book being similar to something else out there or sounding too much like something else, because you didn't write that book and they're not writing your book. You have the unique lens of your experience, your life, everything that you've seen and read and touched, and every conversation is unique to you. So don't worry about other people. Your viewpoint is unique. Your characters, your world building, your story is not their story. It is completely your own. So just focus on that. Tip number 6 is write the story for yourself. Don't write it for the fans. Don't write it for what you think people will want to see in the story. Don't try and think too much about, oh, if I kept this character in, that would work a lot better. People would enjoy that more. If I didn't kill this character off, it would work a lot better. Don't do any of that. Don't think about that. Write the story that you're passionate about. Write the characters the way that you want them, not the way you think other people are going to want them. Write the story that you can't find. Write the story that you're passionate about. And focus just on getting it out of your head and onto the page. Commit to doing that, not thinking about how you think people are going to perceive the book. Just get on with doing it yourself. Because the internet has made the world much, much smaller. And if you're worried about your book not finding an audience, there is one out there for it. There are groups and discords and social media have made everything a lot smaller and a lot easier to find. So if you write a book about a particular thing that you're really passionate about, I guarantee you there are some other people out there who love that thing also and want the book just in the way that you've done it. It may take some work and some effort to find them, but they are out there. So don't try and tailor the book to what you think the audience is going to like. Just write it your way. Tip number 7 is to be honest with your story and with your characters. If you put your characters into a very dangerous situation where their life is under pressure and they're really worried and they're concerned, they're probably going to swear, they're probably going to say some things that don't make sense, they're probably going to react in very unpleasant ways, try and save themselves rather than someone else because it's realistic. Don't try and change the book and tailor it down because you're worried about offending someone, upsetting someone. I mean, don't go out of your way to try and offend someone. You need to have the story as honestly as it is to every situation that you've set up. So don't go out your way to say, right, I'm going to put this in because I know it's going to upset people. That's not true and that's not honest to the situation. So if there's sex, violence, swearing in your book and it needs to be there because it's appropriate to the story, then that's fine. It needs to be in there. Don't worry about, oh, should I tame it down? There again, that's all stuff that will come later. It may need to change, it may not. It depends upon the genre, depends upon the audience and the age group that you're targeting with your work. But just be honest with the situation and the stories that you're creating. Tip number 8 is don't try to make it perfect. There's a common editing trap that a lot of people get writing on their first book or an early book where they get 20, 30, 40,000 words in and then they look back at what they've done and they go, it needs work, it needs tweaking, I need to polish it, I need to make it better, I need to make it right. Don't get caught in that trap. Keep moving forward, keep momentum. You can always come back and edit the book at a later stage. Every book that is finished has been edited a number of times. Some people say that a book is never actually finished, it's just done for now, it's just resting, because you could endlessly revise a book for 20 years and if you're still doing that after 20 years, then there's something really, really wrong. Get to the end of that first draft. As I said, you put realistic expectations on how quickly you're going to do it. So push through, keep moving forward, keep chipping away. If you come up with something in your mind and you think, oh, that does need work, make a note, write it down somewhere, put it in a Word document, whatever, on a sticky, on your phone, whatever, put it down, but have it there and move forward. Don't keep going back and constantly trying to fix things. That way you'll never actually get to the end of the book. And if you get to the end of that first draft, you've got a whole list of things to do, great. Now you can start the editing process and turning that rough first draft into something better. Tip number 9 is don't worry too much about the rules of writing and writing advice that people give you, including mine in some ways. If I'd given you solid rules, if I said to you, you must write every day, and then you go online and watch another video and someone says, write every other day, that's much better, then you get a lot of kind of contradictory information. Everything I'm giving you are tips and suggested pieces of things that you try and follow. They're not solid rules, but I think is the best way for you to get to the end of a first book. Whatever rules people come up with, whatever they say is you must do it this way, is what works for them. I don't write every day. It doesn't work for me, but I'm not going to say to you, you have to do it my way because this is the only way. What I suggest you do is go out there and watch lots of videos about writing advice with writing rules and tips and so on. And then take all of these things and find what works for you. What is your method? Is it writing every other day? Is it writing after work? Is it writing on the way to work? Is it writing in your lunch hour? Whenever you write, however you can write, and as often as you can write, you should. That is my kind of best piece of advice. A lot of people, I think, they lose momentum. Things come up in their life. All sorts of things can happen. You know, family, friends, job changes, the situation in your life changes, and suddenly you don't have the time that you'd set aside to write. Which is why I always advise on a first book, have some kind of a structure. Because if you step away from the book for several months, for whatever reason, the next time you come back, if you don't have something to follow, some kind of breadcrumbs, it's very difficult to get your head back in the same space and start moving forward. So watch lots of videos out there about writing rules, pick and choose from the things that work for you, but you must keep moving forward with that draft and get to the end, however long it takes. Tip number 10 is don't show your book to someone until it's finished. Now, you can have beta readers. Some people have groups of friends that as they're working on a book, they show it to them chapter by chapter and it really helps them. It gives people a boost, it gives them a lift, their friends are very positive about it and it encourages them to keep moving forward, and that's fantastic if it works. However, the flip side of that is someone could read these early chapters on your first draft and say, I don't really get what you're doing. This doesn't make sense. This is really rough. And that'll get in your head and it'll slow you down and it'll make you question everything that you're doing, and you'll go back and start editing because they've said it's rough and it needs work. And that's a real danger. By all means, tell your friends about it, people that you trust, talk about the book and the ideas and what you're playing with, but don't show it to them. There's a great gulf between what is on the page and what is in your head, and getting that gap a lot narrower comes through the editing process as you revise the book over and over until it crystallizes and you get clarity based upon the vision that you've created. So talk about the book by all means, but don't show anybody that first draft until you're done. And even then, I would say revise the book a few times before you share it with anybody that you trust to give you constructive feedback, because too early on and it could completely derail you and you'll just not get to the end of that because you'll have too many voices in your head telling you, well, I don't really like that bit and I'm not sure you should be doing that. They're not writing the story, you are, and you need you to focus on that and stay dedicated and stay absolutely sure in the vision that you've got of your book. Bring it to life in the best way that you know possible. Remember, writing a book is always a marathon, it's never a sprint. Some people can do it in 3 months, some people can do a book in 6 months, but you're constantly chipping away at it. It just takes time. If you can do it in 200 word slots or an hour writing slots or whatever it is, just keep chipping away at that book, get to the end of that draft, and then take a breather, then relax, and then you can start the work of the editing. But it is a long road and it is difficult and it is challenging. It doesn't get any easier, for me at least. I've written a number of books now and had a number of published traditionally. And yet every time I sit down with a new blank page, it is a challenge. But it's something that I still enjoy doing because I love the actual creative process and the whole part of creating something brand new every time I sit down. So those are my top 10 tips. Tell me how you've been getting on. Any comments, any feedback on your books that you've been working on in the past and so on, let me know. But that's all I'm going to talk about for today. I'll be back very soon with another video.